Hello, we're going to focus on Chapter 9, which is Management of Injuries and Acute Illnesses. So how do you respond to an emergency? Well, an emergency involves an unexpected event or condition that requires a prompt response. Every program should have policies and response procedures in place to follow in the event of an illness or serious emergency. And so your role as a director or a staff member is to make sure you know that plan well and you can execute it without having to pull it out and look things up, especially in a serious emergency situation. Plans should be reviewed and updated frequently, and staff should be familiar with these plans and know how they are to be implemented. What about planning these programs and policies? Well, staff members should be trained in basic first aid and CPR. And even though licensing really only requires one person to be trained at the facility at any one time, it is important to have as many as possible, because if you only have one person, it's difficult to orchestrate and maneuver that requirement, and plus your staff can be more efficient and can assist each other if more than one person is trained in first aid and CPR. First aid supplies should be available and accessible and should be always updated to make sure everything is there. And there is a list of what should be in every first aid kit listed on page 237 and 238 in your textbook. And families should be informed of program emergency response policies and procedures so that they're aware of what would happen in the case of an emergency. So some basic principles. If an emergency or illness happens, remain with the child at all times. Never leave the child alone. Do not move the child unless there is danger of further injury where they're at. Do not give the child fluids or medications unless prescribed. Call for medical assistance. Notify the child's family. And then record all the information about the event. And you can find a sample of one of those forms and what should be included on page 224 of your textbook. So how do you evaluate a victim? Well, first of all, you would want to assess the child and the environment, keeping in mind that you don't move them, you don't give them fluids and medications. Just look at the situation. Alert another adult. Attend to the victim. Maybe you need to open their airway. Maybe you need to raise their feet. Record all your observations and treatments so that you remember what you did. And never attempt to diagnose or give medical advice, because we are not trained medical professionals. And so you can find more information about this in Table 9-1 on page 238. And so here is a list of the emergency events that are included in Chapter 9. And this goes all the way from absences of breathing to tooth injuries. And so keep in mind that as we provide support, this is not an equivalent to first aid training. This is just basic information. You should, if you have the opportunity and the resources, get the training in first aid and CPR.